Welcome to the Ungraded Life, where we react less and interpret more. Have you ever heard someone say, I take that personally? At first, it sounds obvious. Of course, you took it personally. It's just the two of us talking here. But beneath that phrase lies something much deeper. When someone challenges our ideas, our political views, our parenting style, our beliefs, it doesn't feel like they're criticizing what we think. It feels as if they're criticizing who we are. And this is one of the more important psychological dynamics shaping modern life. Over the years, I've had to deliver some difficult messages. As a coach, I had to cut athletes from teams. I dreaded cut down day. To tell young kids that they aren't talented or athletic enough to be on a team with their friends, that sucked. I've given low grades, and I've had to discuss those evaluations with disgruntled parents. I've expelled students from schools. I've fired employees from their job. And one of the most emotionally charged responses I've ever encountered is when someone says to me in these occasions, I'm taking this personally. Because what they usually mean when they say that is, you don't value me. You don't respect me. I'm being judged. My worth is being questioned. In other words, the feedback is no longer about behavior or performance or decisions that they've made. It's about identity. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as identity attachment, which is what happens when our beliefs, our roles, our affiliations all become fused with who we are as individuals. So we might say things like, this is my opinion, but we're unconsciously thinking as we say that, this opinion defines me. And when that happens, disagreement feels very targeted. Now, when someone ridicules our ideas or our beliefs, our nervous system reacts as though we're under attack. Our heart rate increases, our muscles tense, we become defensive, and all of this usually occurs well before logic has a chance to intervene. Several psychological theories can help explain why and how this happens. For example, Hazel Marcus, an expert in self-schema theory, argues that we create mental categories that sound a lot like declarations. So you might hear someone say, I'm a leader, I'm conservative, I'm analytical, I'm not a religious person. And what happens is these categories become filters for the way that these people interpret the world. Where this becomes problematic is research in cognitive dissonance reveals that when evidence conflicts with our identifying beliefs, we start to feel psychological discomfort. And to reduce that psychological discomfort, we have some pretty limited options. Right? We can change our beliefs, and that's a very rare decision that some people will make. We can justify our beliefs, which we're quite good at, and we can reject the new information outright. There's also something called life story theory, in which Dan McAdams argues that we create stories about ourselves that provide meaning and purpose for ourselves. So when a core belief is challenged, it can start to feel like the plot of our life is unraveling. We feel lost. We feel out of step. Finally, terror management theory. That says that we cope with our awareness of mortality by attaching ourselves to larger systems of meaning. Think about religion, nationality, strong ideologies or legacies that have been passed on. And when these systems are questioned or challenged, we start to bristle because it feels like our existential security is being threatened. Now, I think it's important to point out that social media didn't create this tendency, but it's certainly magnified it. Every day we broadcast to the world via our social media apps what we believe, what we buy, where we travel, what causes we're supporting, who we want other people to think we are. Our posts become public declarations of our identity. So naturally, when someone criticizes a post or an opinion, or even something that we've liked or supported, it can feel as if they're rejecting more than just our ideas or our photos. It feels like they're rejecting us. What if there's a better way to hold our beliefs? What if we held them more lightly? What if they were models rather than monuments? The poet Leah Purpura captures this beautifully when she writes within one of her poems, I both believe and can't. But her point is that uncertainty doesn't need to be seen as weakness. It could also be seen as intellectual maturity. If our beliefs are held open-handedly, then changing our minds isn't a threat to our identity. It's evidence of growth. So perhaps the real question isn't when did we become so sensitive? I think the better question is, when did we start confusing what we believe with who we are? Because once we learn to separate our identity from our ideas, disagreement stops feeling like a personal attack and it starts becoming what it should be, an opportunity to think more deeply. Thanks for spending such finite resources as your time and attention with us. For more content from the Ungraded Life, you can follow, like, and subscribe on most social media platforms.